Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goosejunkies. We are glad to be back for episode 12, and we have a special podcast episode for you tonight because we're not talking about Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark or Haunting Hour. We've decided to do kids' horror movies. Now, if you're a fan of R.L. Stine, stay tuned because we are doing a throwback of one of his films. I think this might be actually his first kids' horror film that he was associated with, and it's called When Good Ghouls Go Bad. And we are facing that movie off against another movie that came around the same time on the Disney Channel called The Scream Team. Now, both of these movies are pretty niche and not really well remembered because they've fallen into obscurity over the years. But in a lot of ways, the Scream Team especially marked the end of what kids horror the kids horror hype that lasted throughout the early 90s and into the early 2000s. And in a lot of ways we watched, I should say, the end of an era. And I can't wait to hear what we all have to say about this. But as usual, we're going to run through the panel here. You know me, Goosebumps Completionist. We are joined tonight with Goosebumps for Dummies. How are you doing tonight, Alejandro?
I'm doing great. I actually just got done reading a book, which was absolutely fire. You might see a review for it soon, maybe not. Yeah, very excited to talk about these two films. They're very similar and both very interesting in their own ways.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about it too. All right, and then we have Bruce, Minnesota Goosebumps fan. How you doing tonight, Bruce?
Pretty good. But I command before you watch this video to watch When Good Ghouls Go Bad. It's on YouTube for free. Do it right now. Just do it.
Yeah. Go watch it before you watch this podcast because
Do good.
yeah. All right, and then we're also joined with the ever so popular BD Horror. How you doing tonight, BD?
Yo, it's BD from your baby mama's trap house, and you're watching Disney Channel. Dun 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 dun. Boogity boogity boo. I hope you enjoyed tonight. Get ready for the movie reviews.
Oh, that was great. And as usual, Spongy couldn't make it for this podcast, but he did send some docs for us to read off for the episode. An ultimate Goosebumps man could not make it for this, and he did not send us anything. So best wishes to him. You would probably see him on either the next or fairly soon episode in the future. So without further ado, let's get into the movies we want to discuss. We have When Good Ghouls Go Bad, which released in the year 2001 under a very temporary fledgling network known as Fox Family. Now, Fox Family, if you weren't there back in the day, it had very random programming, and they often than not put out some questionable products. But what birthed out of Fox Family, which I think carried on through ABC Family, and then when it became Freeform years later, was I think 13 Nights of Halloween or 31 Nights of Halloween, something like that. And When Good Ghouls Go Bad was a made-for-TV film made for that programming block back in the day. And I remember watching glimpses of this film as a young kid. I don't really remember watching the whole thing until I was about an adult, maybe around the age of 18, 19, and I caught it maybe on like a rerun. And then I reviewed it, a couple years ago now on the channel. And rewatching it with you guys, I have to say, this is probably one of the better R.L. Stine movies, at least with his name attached to it. If I could go back, I would definitely raise the score maybe a tiny bit on that review, retroactively bumping it up. But I think the story is something to commend. And I know Alejandro already brought this up. Both of these movies we're reviewing tonight have a similar idea. And the idea is essentially around a kid or kids. In the case of When Good Ghouls Go Bad, it's about a kid named Danny who is, I think a kid of a single dad. The dad is, looking to enrich his family legacy through his own father, who's played by Christopher Lloyd. And Christopher Lloyd essentially is like a Willy Wonka. He owns like a chocolate factory in this town of like, I think Michigan or something like that. maybe Minnesota.
Minnesota, yeah.
Minnesota. And the town for years has not celebrated Halloween. And that's Uncle Fred's favorite holiday. And we learn in the movie of why the case is. There was a tragic accident years beforehand where this boy named Curtis Danko apparently made something so grisly inside of a kiln in their school that resulted in his death, which scarred the kids that stumbled across his body to the point where they convinced the whole town to never celebrate Halloween. And this boy named Danny, throughout the story, you get the sense that he's close with his granddad or wants to be close with him, but unfortunately, there's some tragedy, and Christopher Lloyd's character, Uncle Fred, loses his life at some point early on in the film, and you get to see Danny go through, loss and grief, and wondering how he's going to fit into this town now that he doesn't have his uncle, Uncle Fred / granddad to be his friend. But things are kind of weird, and Uncle Fred isn't really dead. I mean, he is, but he isn't. And he's essentially a ghoul wandering around Halloween. And there might be some unexplained reasons for this. And we learn those reasons throughout the film. They might involve some supernatural insects that bring life juice into dead cadavers. Kind of weird. And you have this whole climax being set up and having a payoff for with a Halloween party. And you get a recontextualization on who the real villain is, the real story of what happened to Curtis Danko all those years ago. And then you get a kind of copacetic, amicable ending for especially an R.L. Stine story. So, yeah, I want to pass this around. I'm going to pass it over to Alejandro first. What did you think about When Good Ghouls Go Bad, the whole film?
So, this might be a little tough, shortening down an entire movie into what we usually do is a 20-minute or, just singular book that is around 130 pages. So, I'm going to be very brief on some stuff. I'm sure we all will, but I've got to say this movie was very, very fun, and it starred Christopher Lloyd, which played, I believe, the Doc in Back to the Futures, all the parts, I believe. And yeah, it's just, his performance is really the best in the entire film, so I immediately have to commend that. He basically carried the movie, like the Hunchback in Notre Dame, all that hunch on his back, that was the whole movie, and he was carrying it. And yeah, very, very fun. Very, very fun time with him. I also have to commend, but there's some dark stuff for the backstory with the kid, I think Curtis or whatever. And yeah, let's just say it ain't exactly true. Some words have been fumbled around throughout the years, apparently, and it may involve a particular gym coach. Moving on from that, which was awesome, the backstory, very dark and gruesome, apparently. I actually really did like him in the movie. I thought whenever he was on screen was absolutely hilarious, probably the funniest part of the movie. His facial expressions were funny, Mr. Bootleg Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he carried the movie as well. He was like, I don't know, maybe he was one of the Hunchback's feet. I don't know. But he also helped carry this movie. It was really, really funny. And yeah, all the performances were pretty good. I liked the idea of a town that doesn't celebrate Halloween. It was most peculiar, as I'd usually say, but it was very interesting, and I thought it was very unique from the usual Halloween movies, because you usually see a town go, "Ooh, guys, it's Halloween! Let's celebrate! Ooh, oh no, demon!" Stuff like that, And it kind of breaks for me a little bit, so I kind of like that. And I also commend this scene. This scene, like, adds on an entire point. So, near the end, when good ghouls, particularly ghouls, plural, go bad, I think you can apply that that uncle ain't gonna be the only person walking around. And this may or may not be the goth kid. When this particular character's on screen, for as low the budget was, I think this guy looked absolutely fantastic and actually kind of creepy. I was shocked. Yeah, I love skeletons. They're my favorite part of horror in general. I think they look awesome, and this was no exception. This looked great for the low budget they had, around like probably a couple million. Probably around 5 maybe. And yeah, it was just fantastic. I loved the scene with him. It also involves a great reveal in the movie. So yeah, really, really solid. The climax is great. The moral message is great. And yeah, really, really fun movie. And I think I definitely rewatch this just about every Halloween.
Great points, Alejandro. Yeah, I mean, I have fun with this movie too. But I want to say what I want to have to say once I hear everybody else to kind of chime in. But yeah, great points. Great points. I loved hearing what you had to say there. Bruce, what do you think about When Good Ghouls Go Bad?
It's hard to even explain. So this movie opens up on basically this kid's house covered in Halloween decorations. Calling this intro iconic is an understatement to the gods. This movie is so great, has great acting, fun characters, an awesome story, and legit made me cry. Add all of this together, and it makes for one of the best Halloween movies I have ever seen in my life. Christopher Lloyd, amazing, or whatever his name is. He's awesome. I loved him in Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. He's even better here. How could that happen? I don't know. It's 20 years later or something, and it's amazing. I think it's more like 15, but still. Danny's acting, top notch. I really like it. And I also think in a bit we'll pay respects to the actor, but yeah, the other actors, hard to say because they're very somewhat interesting. Like the coach, in my opinion, kind of gets annoying at times. I like some of the scenes he's in, but when you get to see his payback, I guess everything makes up for it. And let me tell you, it has one of the best stories in all Halloween media, especially for kids horror. And I highly recommend y'all check this one out. Once again, free on YouTube. You can find it pretty easily. Just search up the full movie. And what would I rate it out of 10? Probably a 13.5. Would this make my top 10 Halloween movies? I think so. I think that this has high potential to be one of the best R.L. Stine works he has ever done. I think he took inspiration from some very high class writers because this thing, unless it was ghost written by Shakespeare himself, was one of the best works of art I have ever seen in kids horror or just kids media in general. Or, while I'm at that, how about we just say one of the best things that has ever come to the screen? I'm serious. This is so good that how was this made only for TV? This thing could have been made for like one of those like big globe theaters. I don't know what those are called, but it could have worked. If the Omni Theater, oh yeah, slap it on those. And I think that Freeform should pick this up again and just start playing it. I don't know how people have just kind of forgotten about this. I mean, I looked up reviews online, barely any. There's barely anything on YouTube that's still left of this besides just the movie itself. And what little fan base it has is so loyal and agrees with all my opinions because it's just so fantastic. I gotta commend them, honestly, because it is one of the most just absolutely amazingly fantastic movies I've ever watched in my life. So go watch that right now. Also, as some of you guys will know, that very few of you, the actor who played Danny actually went missing back in 2006, and I guess I just wish him all the best if he's still around, and if not, pay respects. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, that's a very sad story about what happened to Joe Pickler. If you want any information, I guess we could put that in the description of this video for you all to go hear what Joe Pickler's story and the story surrounding his disappearance. Yeah, if you have any information out there, if you happen to be watching this, please reach out to Joe's family or contact authorities if you know anything. But yeah, Bruce's sentiment to this movie is definitely going to be a juxtaposition to go through. When we go through the panel here, Bruce absolutely loved this and sees no flaws, which piques my interest to see what BD Horror has to say. BD, what's your thoughts on When Good Ghouls Go Bad?
This is the most set up transition on this podcast so far because we just got the most highest praise given to the movie, and of course I'm the last one that has to go. This movie to me, without Christopher Lloyd, would have been mid. Christopher Lloyd, I think, performance is so good that I gave it an above average. This is a good movie, and I'd recommend everybody does watch it. However, it's not as good as certain praises were, in my opinion. Obviously, regarding the movie, I think I do love it because Christopher Lloyd was in obviously Back to the Future. He's also in Grandpires from Haunting Hour, which I think is one of the few two-parters on Haunting Hour, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. So he's always fun to see, and I think he's definitely the best actor in this movie by a landslide. He does a fantastic job. He brings a lot of fun to the movie. I think he's got a lot of energy. He's got a lot of charisma, especially regarding an older character. And out of the two movies, I prefer him as the grandpa figure. He's a lot of fun to follow. He's very entertaining. As for the other actors, I think the dad does a good job as well. I think the dad and the grandpa overall are a great pairing. The other actors are sort of mid. They're mostly forgettable. There's not really any standout performances. Coach Kankel or whatever his name, Kako Kankel, he sucks. He's annoying. I have certain points where I think he's all right, but he's just sort of over the top, goofy. And then when you find out what his role in the plot is, it almost feels like he got away scot free in regards to certain events. I feel like certain consequences should have been a little bit more higher up in terms of what happened to them, but it is what it is. It is a kids movie. Um, and I do think the plot is a little bit all over the place. I enjoy the lore behind the main villain. The main villain is quite horrific because of what has happened to him in the past, and the fact that that is in a more so kind of low budget kids movie like this is quite impressive because there are actual deaths explained in this movie. It's not as if there's sort of any loopholes. No, the straight up characters have died in the past in this movie, and in horrible ways that I would expect out of some adult horror. So that impressed me quite a bit, and his design is pretty good. I like his design. I think he's creepy. I think how quiet he is makes him even more ominous, just that sort of looming presence that makes everybody scared. I like the fact that he's kind of got this Voldemort presence where the town doesn't really want to bring up his name, doesn't want to invoke his wrath, and you have this sort of urban legend. However, the movie overall pacing's a little bit all over. Not really much goes on. There's a lot of antics. The actual good ghouls going bad. I think they're fun, but they're nothing really that impressive. It's like something out of like, I don't know, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, like that level of a threat. I wasn't really that scared by them. I just thought they were more so funny. And the main character, I think he does do a fine job. It's not that much of a standout in terms of his role. And I have to point this out. There's a very weird kind of scene towards the end where, so the dad and the mom of the girl that the main character likes apparently had some romantic history with each other, and they almost kissed during the movie. And then at the end of the movie, their kids kiss, and that is a little bit sus. I'm not gonna lie to you, that kind of took me out a little bit when you think about it. Goosebumps 2023, you were given that criticism. This happened before that, so you got to give it a little bit, a second glance there. But it reminded me of a movie called Cry Baby Lane. It's not as, I guess, incoherent as that movie. It isn't as weird as that movie was. But this movie does feel a little bit all over the place. But I still think it's fun. Still think it's enjoyable. And do I recommend you watch it? Yes, because I think Christopher Lloyd and the dad and their performances alone will drive a lot of the plot and make you interested. And the main villain, he will make you scared a little bit. So go check it out.
All right, great points, BD. I really want to add on to all of this from everything y'all said. So I'm going to be blunt here. I'm kind of siding with BD on this. I think it's a good movie. Pushing very good, but I think it's like good in like a plain Jane good type of way. It's nothing special, but it's something to be remembered, and it is remarkable in some facets. For a TV movie, it does have some cheap CGI. It does have some problems in terms of its runtime. It's a 93-minute movie, and I would say out of that runtime, there's about 12 to 13 minutes of just antic filler. That's just padding out runtime. Back in the day, syndicated television, you do need a certain length of a movie to have ads and run like a 2-hour time slot, 93 minutes. All you need is 27 more minutes of ads, and those are your ads for 2 hours. So it does kind of show it's not a dated movie, but it's definitely like that vein of syndicated television dated, where it's not a movie made for streaming. They're not just making the story trot along. These days this movie could have been made in like an 80-minute format, have been fine. But back then it was just a different story, and that's really my main negative with the whole film, if I had to say any. Is just these unimportant scenes. And the one I want to bring up is the clown birthday party scene. Not only is it obnoxious with these people chanting this clown's name for like 2-3 minutes, it's a whole joke setup at the Kenkel residence. And the joke is so cringe that it pains me every time I have to sit through that scene. This watch through, I actually fast forwarded it because I know exactly what's going to happen, thankfully. But the first time you watch it, most people might be like, yeah. I definitely agree with all y'all's points about Coach Kenkel. He has some good scenes in the movie, but he is annoying. I think he's by far the worst character of the whole film, by far. And not only because he's recontextualized to possibly be a villain per se, but just his personality is just over the top, right? And in a lot of ways, if you look at the time period this film came out in, the fact it was on Fox Family, the fact that Haim Saban was one of the executives running that channel, it literally reminds me of the Casper straight-to-video movies and R.L. Stine kind of fused together. And I would be shocked if you took like R.L. Stine's name off of this film and just said, hey, this is just a kid's horror movie. I would never guess that R.L. Stine was actually attached to this film. No offense to Patrick Reed Johnson, who directed the movie, but this is coming from a place. I have read the novelization actually written by R.L. Stine based on the script. And I will say this now. The product you get in the movie is definitely a family-friendly, comedy-ized version of the story we get in the book, which has Danny's perspective the entire story, and you get way more emotions out of it. The scenes are definitely changed up, so it's not the Christopher Lloyd show doing antics for 13 minutes of filler. The characters feel slightly toned down because then again, you cut out the filler scenes with Coach Kenkel by himself being over the top and all that. You just get to the point in the book. Not saying that this movie meanders a lot. I do really like the final act of the story. The moral message is really good. The villain, or Curtis Danko, the skeleton creature, looks phenomenal for the budget. I like the concept with fireflies used here. I don't think anybody's brought that up, but I think that's kind of a cool way to bring back the undead, kind of creative here. But for Patrick Reed Johnson's version of this story, he didn't do that bad. It does have a lot of Haim Saban, Casper in its veins, but serviceable. It's a nice movie. So yeah, that's all I got. Does anybody else want to add before we get to Spongy?
I was gonna say I thought the fireflies would have been fine if they would have introduced it earlier, but it did feel a little bit random towards the party scene. That now the fireflies are all of a sudden this big thing, and they have this lore behind it. Because I'm like, all right, we have this whole Halloween lore. We have a lore behind the main villain, which is taking up a majority of what we expect the setup of the movie to be, and then you just throw in fireflies, and all of a sudden that's a new feature. I thought it was creative, but they should have introduced it earlier. Keeping it later towards
Yeah,
the
I see
film
what you're
feels
saying.
wrong.
Like when that reveal happens with Curtis, and you see the flashback, and now the fireflies are there, and you're like,
Yes.
oh, this makes sense as to why he's able to do what he's able to do. But then you're like, well, the mechanism came way later in the movie. Like this feels like we're throwing a Hail Mary here to make things make sense. But yeah, but I do think it's creative. It does
Yeah.
have its issues in terms of like coherency in some areas, I would say, but yeah, I can see what you're saying there.
I'd like to add that there's a plot hole in the movie.
Oh, what is,
A very
I've never really heard this.
In the climax, and I might be fumbling something, when we got the sort of explanation to what really happened in the backstory, if the town, minor spoiler, wasn't really cursed or anything, like, oh, so the gym coach wrote that stupid message in the stands, then why was there actually a big issue when Halloween did happen and, everybody was brought back from the dead? Like, why did that happen if it wasn't supposed to? Like, if the words weren't really meaning anything at all.
Yeah, and like I think that's like a placebo effect kind of thing. I think that's what they were going for. Like, we as the audience supposed to think that the town is dumb for just believing in the story Kenkel came up with, and that's what they want us to go with. Like, oh, the town was just buying the Kool-Aid Kenkel was fixing for him. Yeah, I mean, there's not really much logical sense as to why they would just take a kid's word that he saw in sand and they actually never saw it themselves. They're going off testimony. That's why they banned Halloween. Yeah, that doesn't make much sense. And I can see where you're going with that.
That's good.
That is kind of loose. Now that I think about it, that is a pretty weak point of the plot because when you start to think about it too much, you're like, okay.
Also, you would have to think that with the reveal that you get about who did what, why didn't the villain mostly target him? And why would they sort of take out their revenge on the town, especially if they knew who kind of set it up for them? I feel like that's a little bit like I get why the villain did what they did in terms of, the grand reveal at the party, but it's like they should have taken the revenge out on the one person that's responsible and the only person that was there. Otherwise, doing this whole fiasco just for the town feels a little bit loose too. It's like that seems a little bit excessive.
Yeah, and like the Curtis Danko, like the whole setup of his revenge plot, him like trying to put it into Halloween is an obvious misdirect, especially once you've seen the whole movie and you think back on it. That kind of feels forced in there too. Like, why is he going through this whole misdirect if he could just go straight to the source that caused his death? I mean, yeah, everybody's bringing up good points because this is definitely a story. If you think hard about it, it's going to go down in your mind a little bit. But yeah, let's hear what Spongy has to say about this movie, and then we'll move on to the next one.
All right, let's take a All right, so for when good ghouls go bad. Heavily condensed and paraphrased from my blog review from 2014, meaning I may not stand by at all, but my 19-year-old self made some points. This is easily my favorite of the R.L. Stine movies. It has solid themes of legacies, fathers and son, and the people we look up to and admire. The whole story is driven by the characters' admiration for their fathers in some way. They even managed to do that with the actual villain. That's really interesting and a cut above this kind of movie. It's genuinely funny, all right, thanks to its strange sense of humor that leads to funny moments that usually fit with the story. It has a good Halloween vibe with the interesting story that kept my interest all the way. Yeah, some parts felt pointless, like the workaholic cliche and the German stuff, but the factory did play an important factor in the end. Oh yeah, the German stuff. That's something we didn't cover. That
Oh,
that German escort plot line. You want to talk about the birthday party? The birthday party is not the filler. That is filler. The whole German plot line is straight filler.
and I think there's a sex joke in the film,
Right.
eluding one of the German investors,
Yeah.
one of the dead people. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was very bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah.
Borderline necrophilia. Uh,
You got necrophilia jokes and you got borderline incest jokes. This movie is interesting for a kid's horror movie.
yeah, it does push a lot of boundaries, I will say. And yeah, there are some funny moments. Like that moment in that movie, okay, while it's filler, it is genuinely hilarious when you hear it as an adult because you're like, all right, I didn't expect that off cuff joke. And then I will say this there are some funny scenes involving the girl Dana because of how morbid she is, and like it's like an uncomfortable funny where she like Danny is mourning the loss of his granddad, and she's just talking to him, talking about how dead bodies rot in the ground, and like trying to cheer him up by just being factual and weird.
Oh, that reminds me. There is one funny scene that did get me, and that was when they were carrying Uncle Fred out of the birthday party. That sort of them moving the coffin and pieces of his body falling out and the thing opening up and them freaking out. That was actually funny the way it was shot.
Yeah. Yes. Thinking it back on it, some stuff they did with Uncle Fred is kind of gross. If you're like a younger kid, like maybe 6 or 7, and you saw the hand scene with the car window, or you saw them trying to put him in a trunk, that's kind of gross, and I can give them that. But yeah, I loved everybody's points on this movie, which brings us to the movie that came only a year after, but also follows a very, very striking similar premise to it. And this movie is the Scream Team. And BD, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Scream Team?
This is a first time watch for me, and I'm gonna go over the plot a little bit before I talk about the greatness of this movie. Scream Team is basically about two kids in this case, a pair of siblings named Ian and Claire, and they have an eccentric grandpa as well. However, their grandpa's kind of like an engineer. He makes gizmos and gadgets, kind of like automatic pumpkin carvers and stuff like that. And they love recording home tapes, basically showing off his different gadgets that he makes. And you get the sense that they really love their grandpa. He doesn't get as much attention maybe by other family members, but they really resonate and love him. And it makes him passing away all the more impactful because you actually get a full on funeral scene where they're basically mourning over the loss. And you can see that the kids are essentially basically going through it. I mean, they're watching the home tapes that they made with him. They're really, really grieving while everybody else is sort of embracing the social aspect of a funeral. And the dad doesn't have a good relationship with the grandpa because the dad is kind of trying to push his kids away from the grandpa's eccentric behavior. You can get the sense that maybe he was neglected as a kid and he doesn't kind of want to give this, a grandiose perspective of his grandpa. And as they kind of deal with this funeral and passing away, they have a paranormal experience at night, especially Ian. And by this paranormal experience, he tries to do some investigating, and him and his sister get led to this place. Now, this place is kind of like a location down deep in the woods, and it's like this kind of like DMV or travel place, security check. However, it's not for mortals, it's for the dead, especially ghosts. And you find out that ghosts are basically traveling through this little waiting stop into the afterlife. And here they basically keep track of all the ghosts, all the people who pass away, and send them off to another world. However, there's somebody missing, and that's the grandpa. They can't figure out why the grandpa is missing from this, and they're trying to figure out what may be going on with him. And they eventually get led down to an urban legend about another individual who may have had some history in this town, history with some characters, and also is avoiding the afterlife. However, he's a lot more revengeful, a lot more intimidating, and a lot more scary. And the plots basically intertwine. This movie to me is very fun. This is a very fun Disney Channel original movie. I was smiling, I was laughing throughout the entire thing. First of all, yo man, that intro song. It's on repeat day and night while I'm sleeping. If you played the song during The Exorcist, it's gonna turn into the scene from Scary Movie 2. That's how groovy it is, man. You can jam out to this song all day, every day. All right, you got some great characters, and that's what I gotta say about Scream Team. When Good Ghouls Go Bad was good. However, you could clearly tell that there was casting problems in When Good Ghouls Go Bad because not all the characters are equal. Christopher Lloyd, the main character, and the dad get the focus. The rest of them are mid. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't think there's a single bad character in Scream Team. I think they all do a great job. I think they all get equal focus. First of all, the actual Scream Team. There are three ghosts that work in this travel place, and they're basically elected to capture ghosts, make sure everybody's in line and everybody's organized. You have Jumper, who's super energetic and funny. He was making me laugh throughout the entire movie, although I wish he did get more scenes. You have, I think, Coffin Ed, and Coffin Ed is funny as well. He's got that old man humor. He's really charming. He's got that sort of charisma that drives the plot forward. You have the main lady, which I forgot her name, but she's kind of funny too. She's kind of meant to be more so of that grumpy old woman that's annoying, but she still throws in jokes. She still has a lighthearted side, and overall they all work together. The main characters are good. I think Ian does a great job as a main character. He shows emotions really well. He gets across his personality. You can really sympathize with him. Claire is sort of weaker, but the good thing about the movie is that even though she's a weaker actor, they kind of parody that in a way because Coffin Ed makes fun of how she's always screaming and how she's kind of dumb. So I'm like, I think that's pretty clever that even though she was a weaker actor, they kind of integrated that into the plot and in terms of make her character better. And you have a main villain who is terrifying, y'all. This man is him. This man's got that Himothy energy. He be launching fireballs. He's a warlock. He may have gotten burned at the stake in some Salem witch trial event. He is a terrifying villain. Got the long hair. He looks like Babadook and Joaquin Phoenix had a baby. And that's how you know he's the GOAT. That's how you know he's got that charm to him. And he's really terrifying. And he's got powers. He can launch fireballs at you. He's an actual threat. He can threaten people's lives, and that makes him more dangerous. And overall, the plot is a lot more coherent. I like the lore in the city. I like the fact that everybody's sort of in on it. It's a very similar plot to When Good Ghouls Go Bad, but it's just better structure. And the jokes land better. It's got better action. There's some wonky effects. It's a Disney Channel original movie. You kind of expect that. Not the greatest effects, but just the characters work better. The plot's more coherent. It's much more fun to me. And overall, as a package, I had a great time with this. And I will probably rewatch this every Halloween if I can, because I had a huge smile on my face by the end of the movie. This one gets an 8.5 out of 10. It's a really great movie. I suggest you go watch it. And those are my thoughts.
That's a really high score for you, BD. Oh, so I think we should contrast that in juxtaposition with Bruce. Bruce, what is your thoughts on the Scream team?
Boring first half with bland characters that take me out of the story. It can be fun, but it can also but it can't make up for the rough parts. I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 10, but that's only because of the theme, which is so awesome that I'm probably gonna have to listen to that like every day of my life. I'm not even kidding. It's so good. Like that song, ooh, mmm. Yeah, that was fire, but the rest of the movie sucks. Yeah. Uh, if I'm being honest here, the main characters, by the way, there's a lot of famous people in this movie, so kind of shocking that most of them don't really pay up to what I was expecting. The two kids, moving on. The dad, moving on. Uh, but then you get to the Scream team, and they're good for what they are. I can't really say that they're that great, but they do their job. Are we not going to talk about how this is just a ripoff of when Good Ghouls Go Bad? It's the same movie, except this is way worse. It's like they tried but failed. It's like Shivers is to Goosebumps. Goosebumps is just like this amazing thing, and then Shivers tries to copy it not long after, and it sucks. How can you do this? They took such a classic movie and not even 1 year later, because to be honest, this was probably shot in like April, May of that year. They decide, you know what, let's take from this amazing movie idea and let's make it into the biggest shit show. Sorry, biggest pile of dumpy doo-doo I've ever I've ever thought of. And I don't know what director they got, man, but he was some of the worst directing. Oh, the effects were so bad. The villain was like Mario with the fireballs. I can't go on. I can't go on.
I don't know if we put the pumpkin CGI from Ghouls up to all the CGI in Scream Team, I think they're pretty comparable.
Dude, the pumpkins were actually okay looking. I'm like, I can get past that. It's 2001. By 2002, you should have your stuff together, all right? That was some of the worst CGI I've ever seen, and the whole villain just looked stupid. I don't care what anyone says. Jake the Snake suck. You suck. That was terrible. I could not.
What about that moving hand? What about that moving hand at the birthday party? That was some great CGI, and when good ghouls go bad, right, with the fireflies. That was great.
That was great. Yeah, that was actually good. This movie tries and just fails. I cannot believe they would ever try to do this. Beatty, I love the My Dentist is a Vampire cover, but I'll be honest, this was one of the biggest letdowns. Y'all told me this was like even better than Ghouls Go Bad. How? I don't see any of it. I was watching this whole time and I actually got bored. The whole time I'm like, 40 minutes? I mean, how do you drag on? I mean, it's a good concept, but once again, stolen from Good Ghouls. And you just keep it going and keep it going. With Good Ghouls, they throw in other stuff to kind of keep you entertained, and there's multiple plot lines kind of going. This one has one, and the dad is so annoying. It's like you thought Coach was bad from Ghouls. You've not seen anything. The dad is so annoying and just like, oh my god. And then the natural lighting coming in through the windows. No, not for me. Although it's on Disney Plus if you want to watch it. So there you go.
Okay, we got Bruce's points out of the way. Yeah, nice juxtaposition to what BD had to say. But let's hear what Alejandro has to say about the Scream Team here.
Okay, well, I'll admit, minor spoilers later. I don't think this will end up being better than Good Ghouls Go Bad, but it's not as bad as you're saying it is, in my opinion at least. I thought the movie was pretty dang good. The cover, honestly, is not great. It didn't give me great expectations for the movie. But I ended up being a little surprised. I thought the theme song immediately was great. Immediately a point is going to get added on for that. That was great. Yeah. But I also like the Scream Team themselves. They're not actually called that in the movie, I don't believe, but they're called the Soul something. I don't know what they are exactly, but it has soul in there. They're interesting. I don't know what they are exactly. I like the scuba diver. I know his name is Jumper. I thought he was pretty good. My favorite, my old chap, I don't know what the hell he is. I think he's a British soldier or troop. I'm not sure though. Maybe he's from the Revolutionary War. I'm not sure. Either way, he is awesome. I thought he was the best of the three. The woman there, I feel bad for her in the end. It is pretty sad what happens, but overall, she was a great character. And besides the Scream Team themselves, we got all the other characters, which were all fine. I like the relationship with the two kids and their father. I thought the father's relationship with his father was interesting. And it does go somewhere in the end, and I was a big fan of that. Nice and charming. But I do think the villain is kind of weak. I thought the fireball stuff was kind of weird, but overall, it was some good backstory for him, though. Like, overall, it makes it a little better, and he was definitely well casted. I think he definitely looks a little threatening, at least. And he does involve in an interesting scene earlier in the movie where their house almost burns down. And for the comedy of the movie, I think it might have been maybe a bit better than Good Ghouls. I thought it was pretty hilarious. Like I already said with the kids' relationship with their father, I thought that was hilarious. I thought it was really stupid and goofy. And all the trouble that they get into during the movie. I also thought that the Scream Team themselves were pretty dang funny. And yeah, the whole plot involving the backstory of the villain, if you really want to call it that, the antagonist, I guess. I thought it was interesting how it was very similar to Once Again Good Ghouls Go Bad, where it might have been fumbled through history and it isn't exactly true anymore for what you're hearing nowadays. And yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Um I like the fact that he was a warlock or whatever the hell he was. Yeah, very solid backstory. The CGI ain't great, but obviously 2002. What can you say? No biggie. And yeah, very very fun movie. I would probably watch this every Halloween, but I wouldn't anticipate it as much as Good Ghouls. I don't think. I think that one's a bit more charming, but definitely not as funny. I'd say. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
All right, great points. Bruce, you have something you want to add?
Y'all, the CGI is worse than you think. The Goosebumps show from the 90s outdoes it by like a few miles. I'm not even kidding. I'm not going to go into a tangent, but dude, that's how bad this is. I know that they're both, well, actually, no, they're both made for TV. Whatever. I know that Goosebumps probably had a higher budget, but really? Like, when was this, like 6 years after that? Come on, dude.
Your budget.
It's so bad. I can't. I'm sorry. All right, continue.
All right.
Let
Well,
Completionist tell these kids what's up. Go ahead, Completionist.
all right. Let me just crack my knuckles real quick and stretch out. So the Scream team, I think, is very close to When Good Ghouls Go Bad's, I guess, novelization for me. It's more coherent, it's more concise, it's less scatterbrained. There's less deadpan humor, scenes that drag out for 5 to 6 minutes to set up cringy jokes. It's more organic. The characters are all developed. There's actually character arcs for all the main characters, even the Scream Team ghosts themselves, which are actually called the Soul Patrol in the movie. You have Eric Idle, Tommy Davidson, and Kathy Najimy. All famous actors. Eric Idle, he was in Monty Python, and he was in a few vacation movies. Kathy Najimy, she played one of the Sanderson sisters in Hocus Pocus. And you had Tommy Davidson, who voiced the dad on The Proud Family. All three great performances from these Soul Patrol members. Zachariah Cole, the main villain of the story, probably one of the more threatening and intimidating villains I've seen in kids horror, if I'm being honest. Yeah, the CGI kind of fails them at points. They try to do some slow mode, I guess, to make the rendering look less choppy, and that is noticeable when you watch it. But I will dare say this soul stealer villain. I mean, he goes around and takes people's souls after they die. He takes their energy, he brings them down to a mine shaft, and uses them to gain power for vengeance. I mean, the scene with the well in the movie, even though they're CGI ghost heads, the scene with Claire almost falling into the well in the mine shaft was frightening. Like, that was an actual eerie scene. And that kind of got to me as an adult rewatching this. Even though, like I said, the ghost heads are CGI in there, it's still eerie. And like, I dare say, there's more scary scenes in here than When Good Ghouls Go Bad. But I'm not trying to like prop this movie up by tearing that movie down, because I think this movie does have a really touching story at the heart of it. You know, Ian and Claire, as BD brought up, they're going through a hard time. They lost their grandfather. The grandfather meant a lot to the town that they're in. The dad is trying to sell their grandfather's home, and Ian is torn about that because he doesn't think that's a good idea. He thinks that this was his home. We should, stay here and take care of it. They want to live here to be close with their granddad. And the dad, you figure out by the end, also wanted to be close with the granddad, his own father as well. And you get that touching scene where the grandfather and the dad agree to talk until the granddad decides to go off and move on and go to the afterlife. I thought that was beautiful. And honestly, the main characters like Claire, she has like this mean sister arc, but then she grows to be more in tune with Ian, and she grows more confident in herself. Ian, he is at wits with his dad the whole movie. He has the conflict with the father, and he has to kind of learn to get over himself a little bit and look past his own wants and needs to be a team player. And I think that was a good arc. Um, yeah, I like the Halloween aesthetic to it. You have like a celebration celebrating an urban legend that goes back to the origins of the town, kind of similar to Hocus Pocus. And you have the similar setup to When Good Ghouls Go Bad, with instead of the town not celebrating Halloween, they're kind of celebrating and glorifying a person that they thought was a cold-blooded killer, which is kind of weird, but it's still dark. It's a dark backstory, kind of like similar to Curtis Danko. What happened to Zachariah is pretty edgy. Um, so yeah, I mean, I just think this is a better product. However, honestly, if I'm pairing this up with the novelization of When Good Ghouls Go Bad, they're kind of close and probably tied for me. But if we're talking movies, I don't know, might be kind of getting ahead of myself, but I definitely think that this one is going to edge out the win for me. Um, but yeah, I guess let's listen to what Spongy has to say about the Scream Team before we, decide which one wins here. But does anybody have anything else they want to add while BD's pulling up Spongy's thoughts?
I wanted to give a shout out too. I think that the dad and the son relationship is better than When Good Ghouls because you got that scene where the kid freaked out and he wanted to leave the house, and right away the dad's like, no, 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 let him go get his space. Like he tells the daughter, yeah, yeah, let him go get his space because I was in that same position when it came to my dad. So first of all, that is a deep moment. That's a deep moment between father and son. So I got to commend it for that. There's actually some really good parent relationships in this movie, and I think that the dad goes from being this like unlikable uptight jerk to like you understand the situation and resonate with them more by the end.
Yeah,
Okay,
totally.
I can agree with that actually. I'll be honest, the dad is kind of insufferable in the first half or so, and then yeah, actually, I kind of changed my opinion. This movie's gonna get a 6 out of 10 because the last half is actually pretty good. It does what it's supposed to, and I don't think it lives up to Ghouls again, but I think that it works a lot better than the rest of the movie, for sure. I can't get into the first like 2/3 of it.
I also think it's way more serious up front than Ghouls was. Ghouls didn't start to get serious until about 15, 20 minutes in. As in, Scream Team is within the first 5 minutes. I don't know. Like, it depends on what you're looking for. If you want, like, a more sillier tone movie, um, less serious, Ghouls definitely would be the watch. But if you want something with more substance throughout, I think Scream Team is the one there. But
This is what
and
Spongy
I'm
has.
speaking on like writing and emotional stuff here, but
I
Yeah,
guess.
I agree with you. All right, and then Scream Team, same as above, but the review comes from 2013. It's a solid old DCOM. It doesn't stand out as one of the best, but it does enough to stand out as good. It was more than I was expecting. The story ties in a few emotional aspects, and the story becomes clever at points. It surprised me with that aspect. The characters are likable and enjoyable, the villain is cool, and it manages to be both funny and sweet at times. The acting is solid, especially from Eric Idle and Kat Dennings. It has a few clumsy parts that dock some points, but that doesn't ruin it too much. If it's no Don't Look Under the Bed or even Girl versus Monster, but it works well enough.
oh yeah, Don't Look Under the Bed is a masterpiece. We should definitely watch that movie in the future. That
Okay.
movie blows any movie that we'll talk about on this podcast out of the water for kids horror. Um, but yeah, um, so I guess we're gonna get into the verdict of which one we think is better. I think we're gonna have to read off Spongies in a sec. But to kind of start this off, both of these movies came out in the tail end of the silver age of kids horror, 2001, 2002. In fact, if you guys know, on the Discord, where I've been putting together like a timeline of like, the golden age to silver age of kids horror, the Scream Team came out right around the time like the final Nightmare Room book came out. This is like when the Nightmare Room show went off. This is right before, the 2003 Goosebumps reprints. This is right before R.L. Stine just stopped releasing things. I think this was the last thing he did before he made mostly Ghostly. Um, so, when we're talking about When Good Ghouls Go Bad and the Scream Team, this marks the end of that 90s boom of kids horror. We literally watched the tail end of that. Um, Now, which one is better? Even though they're kind of the same movie, I've already teased this. I'm gonna have to give the edge to Scream Team. I think there's more of a focus of emotions and substance there for me, especially with an emotional story that both are trying to be. I feel like I get more out of an emotional story in the Scream Team than I do in Ghouls. However, I'm not trying to undersell Ghouls when I say this. I think Ghouls has its moments, clear moments of greatness, and I think it has probably the better final act or more memorable one. But for me, I just think the more solid film is with Scream Team. I just think the story's there, all the characters are likable. You have, clear good writing here, some spotty writing, and I don't necessarily blame R.L. Stein for what happened in the film because I've read the novelization and I think it's definitely an improvement. Like I've already mentioned, I think the movie's Patrick Reed Johnson's version of what he wanted to see done with the movie. But it just kind of reminds me of what I hate in some ways as well of those old Saban Casper movies, and just it has that thing going about it, and it just rubs me the wrong way. But it's still a solid, good movie nonetheless. But like I said, Scream Team wins. And I'm going to pass it over to Bruce. I don't think we have to guess which one wins for you, but you want to go ahead and state it.
Obviously. No, I'm just kidding. Ghouls wins by a long shot here. I can appreciate what Scream Team tried to do, but it couldn't do it as well as Ghouls did. I don't want to restate everything I already said, but it's just such a fantastic watch. I'm probably gonna have to get the VHS of it, even though I want the DVD. The DVD is a lot of money, but if I ever find that, or if you guys find that, I suggest you pick it up, or at least watch the movie first to see if it's your type of thing. I really liked it though. Highly suggest it once again. I'd go Ghouls on this one.
Okay. Alejandro, which one do you prefer?
This may come as a shock, but I think I'd say Good Ghouls Go Bad, whatever the hell it's called. It has a lot more I like about it than Scream Team, even if Scream Team is really good. I think it beats it just barely. Scream Team is like 0.5 lower, 8.5, just like what BD said. I'd give Good Ghouls Go Bad like a 9 out of 10, just a bit higher because I thought the uncle character was a huge carrier. Like I said earlier, he's the hunchback of Notre Dame, and the hunches that are, in fact, on his back is the entire movie. Plus, his shoes are probably the football coach, wherever the hell he is, gym coach. Yeah, I think there's a lot more great characters in the movie. The other movie just had solid characters overall. We had great characters in this movie, even if the side characters aren't as good. And also because the plot is more interesting and more intriguing and just more fun than Scream Team, even if that movie is funnier. But who knows? Maybe on another day I would go Scream Team or something. But I just feel Good Ghouls Go Bad.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like sometimes movies or books or whatever are so close that it just depends on the day and your mood. Like, oh, I'm feeling this one more, and then like 6 months down the line, oh, I'm feeling this one more. Totally understand. They're very close in my opinion, but kind of far away. But that's just me. I think BD feels the same. BD, I don't have to guess which one you pick, but which one do you pick?
Let me think about this. Boogity boogity boo, get yourself together. Close your eyes. Of course, man. Scream Team is gonna win. But Good Ghouls is still a good movie. I recommend you watch it. Scream Team had better characters, much better casting, had better humor. It landed overall as a more coherent story, and it had emotional weight to it. I think that Good Ghouls is creepier and has some better, scarier scenes. But overall, I think Scream Team makes for the better movie. And this, to me, feels like a really good DCOM movie. If I had to pick out a few DCOM movies that I love, Sky High I have to rewatch. I don't know how good Sky High holds up, but Sky High, Halloween Town, and then Scream Team, I'm gonna throw up on that roster. Disney Channel original movies, this is up there.
All right, so we have a tie, and that means Spongie's the tiebreaker. All right, let's see what Spongie decided, and that's going to be the victor.
I already know what he picked, but let me read out his thing.
All right. So, Mr. Spongy, he said, oh boy, Good Ghouls is my pick. Scream Team is good, but it's not the one I think about these days compared to similar things. Good Ghouls has its flaws, but it stands out as a Stein-branded movie. It's pretty solid, and I personally prefer it. Damn you, Spongy.
I mean, yeah, and you know, as a Stein fan, part of me does pull for Ghouls on this one too because Stein is associated with it. However, I do think, and I've said it multiple times, I think he's the story I associate more with him is the book version, not the movie. I think that's more Patrick Reed Johnson, Haim Saban, you know, putting his hand in the candy jar kind of thing. But I can definitely see the charm, especially if you're a diehard Stein fan. Ghouls definitely has its moments that are comparable to Scream Team, and I'm not too upset being in the minority on this one because I do enjoy both movies. So yeah, we have an R.L. Stein movie victory. I don't know if that's going to happen every time though, because there are some pretty bad ones we have yet to talk about. So we'll save those for another day. But yeah, discussion. You guys still filling up for discussion?
Yes, sir.
All right, so it's just going to be us unless we want to read off with Spongy. Let's go ahead and read off Spongy to kick us off. We decided for our discussion to talk about our favorite subgenres of kids horror. And what we mean by that is like you can pick like a theme or you can pick a certain topic books cover. Like, for example, Luck Charms, or you can like Halloween books or camp books in the genre. You know, we're thinking on that subgenre category of which one do you constantly gravitate to. So yeah, let's have Spongy kick us off with his pick, and we'll move from there.
All right. So what Spongy wrote was nothing, but according to the Discord, he does like circus horror and camp horror. So
I would definitely think that Spongy would pick camp horror. He's a big camp horror enthusiast. He's always hunting for new stories, which shows the dedication and passion. You know, this is the kind of thing that I think we're trying to get at. And I'll pass it over to Bruce first for this question. Bruce, do you have a favorite subgenre in kids horror?
Not just only kids horror, but also in adult horror as well. We got aqua horror. Yes.
Aqua horror? Okay.
Yeah. We got Deep Trouble, best Goosebumps book of all time. You already know. We also got Deep Trouble 2, which is fire. I could go on. If we're counting camp books, which honestly some of them have some pretty awesome aqua scenes in them, I can count them. Like Friday the 13th, if we're saying adult horror or Sleepaway Camp, those are also great. You also, in the kids horror genre, I haven't read them yet, but you also have things like It Came from the Deep from Dead Time stories, which I'm really excited to read. Probably gonna on spring break, because why not? Which also has to do with stuff like Deep Trouble. So I think as of now, not just in kids horror, but in all horror, is the best like subgenre. I really like it. Everything I have experienced so far has been awesome. I hope nothing breaks that. But I don't know. We'll just have to see what Dead Time Stories brings, I guess.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of aqua horror. Just because I just don't think that many writers kind of know what to do with like aquatic villains. Normally, they go like to the whole Atlantean thing, or they just do like fish. That doesn't take away of them being good stories. I just feel like writers don't have much ideas to contribute. Have you ever seen the movie Underwater or the Meg movies?
Not the
No.
Meg.
You know, like when they go down to like deep ocean. I think it was underwater where she goes down and there's like creatures or aliens down there or something, like at the bottom of the ocean, like haunting her sub or something. That was kind of creepy. And I have thalassophobia, and that should speak volumes. Fear of deep water. I would dare say that the water stories do get to me. Like when I read Deep Trouble 2, that scene where in like near the beginning of the book, maybe it was Deep Trouble 1, that scene actually bothered me. And in Creep from the Deep, the scene early on in the story when they hear about the shipwreck, that stuff gives me like legitimate chills across my whole body. I just can't think about it. It creeps me out.
Yeah,
Also-
Jaws is also great. I actually consider that kind of like kids horror. I mean, it's not directly for them, but it's PG rated. Why not? And then also in the genre of kids horror, teen horror, we got some Fear Street books. So I'm really excited to read these too. I think these are somewhat related to them. I mean, they've both got water on the covers, so yeah. Why
Beach
not?
horror.
Maybe I'll read these on spring break. I don't know.
Also,
You should,
one of
you should try the Piranha movies.
Oh,
One
I've
of the
seen the
be-
first one.
one of the best authors of all time also is a big fan of ocean horror, which is H.P. Lovecraft. He combines space and water because a lot of you don't know this, but we've explored more of the moon than we have our own oceans. That's a little scary thought to leave for food for thought for you guys.
One of the scariest movies I've ever seen, and it's not really a horror movie, but it's The Abyss. If you want to know, like, the most frightening thing I could ever imagine in my own personal mind is sitting through watching that movie. It petrifies me to even think about it. But yeah. All right. Alejandro, what's your favorite subgenre of kids horror?
Well, I don't have generally like, oh, this is the basis of the story, like mystery, dystopian society, or obviously horror, stuff like that. I don't have directly genres, but I do have stuff you mentioned, like certain topics. So, first off, aliens and outer space related stuff. Now, as much as I hate one of the particular books in Goosebumps relating to that, Haunting with the Stars, absolutely garbage. I really like the other books, and not just Goosebumps. I have read, well, this basically is Goosebumps, Creatures from Beyond Beyond. Yeah, when I figured out that was a space related story, I knew it was absolutely in my territory, and I loved it. So I love stories like Brain Juice, another alien kind of related one, and I love stories that have alien stuff in general, just like Krebels, Creatures from
Calling all
Beyond.
creeps?
I'm also excited to read Sapped in Space because it's a space story. TikTok You're Dead even had some space stuff in there, so I really like that. And it doesn't have to just be aliens, just space stuff in general, like different planets and stuff, as long as it ain't stupid. Like Haunting with the Stars. Yeah, I really, really, really love that stuff. It always draws my attention. I'm trying to get another book, I think Dead Time Stories or something. Welcome to Alien End, because I think it'll be a blast, because I just, I love that genre.
Bone Chillers?
Yeah,
That's Bone Chillers. Are you thinking about Invaders from Planet X?
Planet X, yeah.
I don't think I've heard that one, so
Yeah, that's from Dead Time Stories. It
That's
has a
aliens.
postcard, I think, inside of the book too.
Alien story.
I'm gonna look out for that.
Let me
Well,
ask you a question. Alex. Are you a fan of the Jimmy Neutron movie?
Yeah.
Because a lot of kids' horror that revolves aliens remind me of Jimmy Neutron's movie, doesn't it? It doesn't it all kind of blend into that? There's
Yeah.
a couple of genres that do it. One of my favorites does as well. But it's kind of funny how they all kind of tell the same story. And I don't mean that in a mean way, because one of my favorite genres is essentially the same boat as you with this one. But it's basically just the same song and dance, but with like different aliens and like what they do. Like body squeezers, or I'm just trying to think of some other ones in Goosebumps.
Please don't feed the weirdo.
Please don't feed them. Is that an alien? I
Technically,
can't remember if he's an alien.
I think that's the alien.
Egg Monsters from Mars.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
alien. That's an alien one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I think about like alien stories, I always think about like Jimmy Neutron, about the kids going to the alien planet, encountering aliens on a different planet.
oh, you also have Completionist's favorite alien story, which is Weirdo Halloween, his number one rated alien story.
Don't remind me of that PTSD, please. Oh, but that's fun that you like alien books. I think that's cool. BD, what's your favorite subgenre?
So I have two. Although I would give an honorable mention to Alien. However, there's so much variety with the Alien stories that some of them are really just boring to me, and the ones that are unique are good. but it's too variable. So the two types that I have, I'm gonna focus on the first one because the first one's never let me down. But the second one, I just want to give a little mention to circus slash carnival horror. Circus slash carnival horror probably has to be one of my favorite environments for adult horror and kids horror. The first One Day at Horrorland book for kids horror, fantastic. It's a super fun book. I love it a lot. You have Are You Afraid of the Dark? Laughing in the Dark, even though that one wasn't my favorite at a lot of points. I love the carnival setting. I love the main clown. I love that scene inside of the funhouse. Um, you actually have the Haunting Hour episode Funhouse, which was a psychological horror. I love that one as well. And even adult horror, because there's an episode from Tales from the Dark Side called Circus. That's one of my favorite stories, probably of all time, that I've seen. I love that one a lot. However, there are some weak ones out there. So if you had to ask me my number one, there's one genre of horror, kids horror and adult horror, that's never let me down. I love each and every single story, which is haunted mansion stories. I don't know what it is. The haunted mansion stories always happen to be my favorite, whether it be Headless Ghost, even if you want to argue Dead House, because there was some afterlife stuff going on in there. Um, I heard Shutter Mansion's really good. There's some adult horror ones that are basically haunted mansion stuff. Jerusalem's Lot from Stephen King, one of my favorite short stories of his. That one is a haunted mansion story. There's a lot of great stories out there involving haunted mansions. It's such a creepy environment, even though it's been done so many times. It always works. It always gets on my nerves. And one of the most terrifying things to me is my household, where I'm supposed to be safe, being compromised and being the place of all this evil and scary stuff going on. So that kind of hits home for me. And seeing these environments always freaks me out. And funny enough, even Go Eat Worms, that sucks. The best scene in that book is the Haunted Mansion story, which happens for like a couple pages. So yeah, Haunted Mansions never let me down so far. And I always love it. So that's my favorite type of horror.
Okay. All right. Respectable. Respectable. Bruce, you have something you want to add?
I actually have to have that as my close second because I just realized, yeah, things like Welcome to Dead House and what is, in my opinion, if you guys can somehow find a copy of it, Pain House being one of the best Goosebumps books I've ever read. So, yeah, that's actually probably my close second. I don't know about anything past that, but yeah, Haunted House Horror, Haunted Mansion, and Aqua themes. Those two, fantastic.
All right. I think y'all picked some great subgenres, and then I have like the most niche ones. So I had three on my mind. The first one was obviously like items possessing the wearer stories. Something about like reading that arc from like Diary of a Mad Mummy or reading the Haunted Mask books or Werewolf Skin. Something about putting something over your skin feels claustrophobic to me, and then have that like possess you and take you over and take control of your body is such a cerebral horror. Whenever I read stories like that, I just get such a kick out of them because I try to imagine how the characters are feeling, even though like they're trapped in their own body, but they have no will over it, and how creepy that must feel. That just gets to me in a lot of ways, and that's like one of my lifelong fears I've had ever since I was a young kid. I watched Haunted Mask when I was maybe 2 years old, and I think it formed a phobia of mine, which is being smothered, like being like put under leaves or water, a lot of blankets. I can't do it. I don't know what it is. I get claustrophobic. But yeah, that one seems too obvious. Another one I really enjoy are like electropath stories, or for the most part, from what I've read, like Killer Computer and Don't Scream from Goosebumps, Killer Computers from Spine Tinglers. There's another one movie called Brain Skin, which is more of like a teen young adult movie from the 90s. Kind of weird, and it's very 90s of the time to have electropath stories, but I always usually have a fun time with them, even the bad ones, like what is it, the Renegade Virus from Are You Afraid of the Dark? That one still is kind of fun in some ways, even though it's really bad.
Virtual
So
pets.
there you go. um, but my absolute favorite, actually, the ones I'm always looking for, but ironically I have yet to find a perfect book in, is movie theater horror. Now, back to my point when I said to Alex, every time I think about aliens, kids going to another planet, I think of Jimmy Neutron. When I say that basically every kid's horror story that I have found involving a movie theater has the same idea and the same concept, I mean it. It's always they get either put into the movie or the movie creatures come to life in their reality, and there's no in between. Maybe Phantom of the Megaplex might be the token standout in the subgenre, but stories like R.L. Stein's Zombie Town, not the movie, the short story book, but you get what I'm saying. The tale of what is it?
Midnight Madness.
Midnight Madness from Are You Afraid of the Dark? You have Lights, Camera, Die from Spine Tinglers. Invaders from the Big Screen. I love movies. I mean, I'm a manager at a movie theater. I mean, that's what I do for a living. So, thinking about films and how they make me, escape reality, seeing it in kids' horror is just so much fun. What upsets me the most, though, is how R.L. Stine has never made a mainline book around movies or movie theaters. Even though, like I said, it'd probably be just like the other ones, if I'm being honest. But it's just such a fun genre, and it's definitely underrepresented. And that's just how I feel. But yeah, that's my favorite. I just really dig it. Does anybody else want anything to say before we have to exit this episode? All right, so that wraps up episode 12 of Goosejunkies. I'm definitely going to put the links for everybody that's panelists on this podcast, for everybody's channels and Twitter pages and blogs will be down in the description and in the comment section of this video. As well as I mentioned, I will be putting the story of Joe Pickler's disappearance in the comment section and in the description. If you have any information, please reach out to anybody that you can. And God bless Joe Pickler if you are out there or no longer with us. Regardless, we all miss you. Okay. So for episode 13, since we're going back into the Goosebumps theme of things, we decided to go with Lucky 13, our luck-based stories. And we decided to go with a rather famous, or I guess infamous, Goosebumps book. It came from Beneath the Sink. And we're actually going to face it off with another R.L. Stine story from pretty much a sister series to Goosebumps, known as The Nightmare Room, from a book called Locker 13. And for the first time, our discussion is actually going to be a third luck-based book centered around R.L. Stine. It's going to be Ghosts of Fear Street's The Tale of the Blue Monkey. And we're going to decide which of the three we like most. Until next time, take care. Thank you all for watching. Please like, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to these other panelists, please do so. Much is appreciated. And please comment your thoughts on this episode and what you'd like to see in future episodes. Take care. Have a good night.
Deuces.